on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How are you, Dylan?
I'm doing wonderful.
You know what? Last week, we hit our 300 episode mark and didn't even talk about it.
Oh my gosh.
Didn't even celebrate 300 episodes.
Damn it.
This is 301.
That's crazy.
Can you believe it?
No.
That's a huge catalog.
That is a huge
true crime.
Yeah, that's a huge catalog of long form content.
Most definitely.
Yes.
Why aren't we famous?
I don't know.
WTF, people, make us famous.
But we do have some incredible listeners, and that's what's kept us going.
No, we really do. We have amazing support, and we're so lucky, Dylan.
Very lucky.
We're into the month of October here in our home state of North Carolina, covering true crime all in the mountains. And we are bringing you a case today that hits very close to home.
Literally.
This case, we've had it in the pipeline since we started the podcast, but we've kind of gone back and forth on whether or not we should cover this case because it is still a very sensitive topic for a lot of folks in our community.
We actually considered this case in our first 5 episodes maybe, as one of our very first episodes. And we decided that time, we were just going to not do it out of respect for the community and the family and everything locally here. It's a rather horrific tale, honestly. But, we're 4 years in. We've waited. Actually, Heather has passed, this along to other sizable podcasts maybe have covered it. And you know what? I want Heather to do justice by the case and do her style to it.
Yeah, I want to cover this case with the utmost respect. Dylan, are you ready to get into today's story?
I am.
All right. This is a tough one.
It is tough.
God bless you, son, were the last words spoken by 72-year-old Earl Phillips before a shotgun blast to the head ended his life. Earl would be brutally murdered along with 4 members of his family. Earl Phillips was born May 15th of 1927 in the Jonathan Creek community of Haywood County, North Carolina. He had spent his whole life in this area, save for the years he served as a private in the Army during World War II. At Cove Creek Baptist Church, Earl was a deacon and a choir director. He was a well-respected and liked member of the community, a retired truck driver who had worked at Haywood Oil Company. His wife, Cora, was 71 years old. She had also lived in Haywood County, and after marrying Earl, was a homemaker. She was active alongside her husband at Cove Creek Baptist Church. Cora was known to be quiet, but always accompanied her outgoing husband, Earl, at church. And he was there every time the doors were open. And he was usually the one to open the doors and the last to leave.
So he was very involved and a big part of his local church.
He stood on the church's stoop, greeting everyone who walked through the door for Sunday and Wednesday services. Earl would say to folks, quote, "If you don't believe in God, all you have to do is look at these mountains."
That's a good way to look at it.
And Dylan, I was actually driving around today down in this part of our county where the story takes place. And I was thinking about that quote from Earl. And I was looking around at our beautiful mountains, brushed with fall color. This is definitely peak week. Oranges, yellows, browns, reds. So bold, so beautiful.
Yeah, and it sounds like Earl was born and raised and lived all of his life, basically, right there in that very area, and would every day have the same view as you were looking at. So that's a pretty wild thing.
Not only were they faithful to their God in church, but also they took Jesus' teachings to heart. They had no enemies. Everybody would say Earl was one of the sweetest people you'd ever meet, and his son Eddie was often compared to his daddy. People would say, just like his daddy, they're just really nice people. Just good-hearted, kind folks who'd probably give you the shirt off their back.
Oh, definitely. What do they call this? Like salt of the earth?
Yes.
Just, good, wholesome people.
The events of September 30th, 1999 were so unimaginably random and tragic that they'll never make sense. Even the killer himself admitted in his final interview that he didn't know why or how a petty crime spree would end in the deadliest massacre a small mountain town would see to date. Our story really begins on November 17th of 1973, when Charles Wesley Roach is born to parents Daniel and Bonnie in Hidden Night, North Carolina. Now, if you're not familiar with Hidden Night, Dylan, it was named for William Earl Hidden, a mineralogist who was sent to North Carolina by Thomas Edison to search for platinum. Hidden discovered a gem that became known as Hiddenite in the mines nearby. For years, Hiddenite was only found in Alexander County, North Carolina, though now it has been discovered in Madagascar and Brazil. So the area hosts a popular gem mine where tourists can find their own emeralds, sapphires, and other precious stones. Only around 507 people call this tiny town home.
Oh, wow.
So Charles Roach is born in this very, very small community, only about 500 residents.
I must say, anytime I'm near a waterway, river, creeks, and things like that, I'm always got my eyes peeled for sun gleaming off maybe a gem.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, because I don't know if it's still the case, but this area had produced the largest intact ruby that ever at one point.
There was, I believe, $1 million sapphire found in a mine down in Canton, North Carolina.
Yes.
Roach, by all accounts, grew up in an abusive home. His father, Daniel, was a raging alcoholic with a violent temper. His mother, Bonnie, wasn't much better. When Bonnie was a child back in 1958, she witnessed her father, 53-year-old Howard Fisher, throw gasoline on her mother, 37-year-old Annie Greenway Fisher, and light a match. Annie was severely burned over 90% of her body and died days later from injuries sustained in the attack. Bonnie and her siblings were placed in various homes by social services. Howard was arrested for the murder, but denied it was intentional, claiming his wife had lit a cigarette after spilling the gas can. I was unable to find if he was convicted of this crime. I scoured all of the old newspaper articles I could find, and I saw of his arrest, but I couldn't find any more details.
If you spill a little bit of gas, you typically don't splash it all over your body or over even a significant portion of your body and then accidentally, light yourself on fire. So I don't know if I believe him.
Well, his wife, as she, is in the hospital with these significant burns, tells doctors, nurses, and police that her husband did this to her.
And so here you have an argument just in the very beginning of the story. You've painted two pictures. You have the Phillips family, kind, caring, even their children are seen in the same light. They grow up into caring individuals, good people. And then you have the Roach family, horrible, traumatic household, fighting, domestic abuse, attempted murder, or something like that. Setting someone on fire, I think, is particularly dastardly. I mean, it's just evil. I mean, it's horrible. And then Roach goes on to become, a criminal and leads him down this path.
Well, it's almost like that generational trauma is rearing its ugly head.
Yeah, but then
or skipping a generation. I mean, we've got his grandfather, a vicious person, who's going to throw gasoline and light his wife on fire.
Yeah.
His daughter's witnessing that. And then, in turn, she's maybe not the best mother. And then we've got the grandson who's going to go on to to do horrific things.
Generational kindness versus generational trauma.
Yes.
Wow.
Early on, Roach spoke with a stutter. His mother, Bonnie, would punch him in the face when his language would get muddled. Daniel was abusive as well, beating the boy. At times, he'd be held underwater in the bathtub, almost like waterboarding. Can you imagine, as a child, your parents doing this to you?
No, that's terrifying for someone to do that to me now. If they were, man enough to hold this down.
His mother forced him to watch. If animal abuse bothers you, you're going to want to skip ahead a few seconds.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead.
So his mother forced him to watch as she killed a litter of kittens one by one. She set puppies on fire. When Charles wanted to go to church as a little boy, she threatened him with punishment. Like, when you come home, something bad's going to happen. And when he did return home, Bonnie had killed his dog and left the body on the doorstep where he would find it.
Well, I mean, there's your evidence. Her father was horrible, and she sounds like she's a monster herself. I mean, killing these defenseless animals is insane to me anyway. But doing it in retribution to your child in some form, or killing them and leaving them there for them to find. That's horrible.
It's psychotic.
It's psychotic, yeah.
Roach didn't get much reprieve from school either. He was teased because of his last name, Roach, and kids made fun of his stutter. A childhood friend who would later testify that Roach was a follower who went along with the crowd and seemed to adopt the personality of whomever he was hanging around with. By adulthood, Charles Roach had a lengthy criminal history and problems with drugs and alcohol. By fall of 1999, he was unemployed. He had no income, no job prospects, no bank account. Roach had been staying with a friend in Alexander County, couch surfing because he also didn't have a place to live.
Well, even the incredible opportunity of starring in the movie People Under the Stairs as Roach, the boy behind the wall, did not even change the course of his life. It did not improve it.
Is that your attempted joke?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Some Halloween humor there.
Yeah,
Dylan.
it's spooky season.
Tony Mark Stout had grown up with Charles Roach. He had allowed Roach to crash at his house for a few days. In 1997, Stout and Roach had been charged together in a kidnapping case in Iredell County, and both were convicted of felonious restraint. Since 1990, Charles Roach had 21 convictions in Alexander County. To say he was known to police, well, that's an understatement.
Well, he's got a name that stands out. You're not going to forget even the one time you deal with him, right? A guy named last name Roach. And just over and over, all the time, whenever trouble turns up, this guy's not far. It's not hard to find.
Roach himself admits he turned to drugs and alcohol to deal with his pain. On the morning of September 29th, 1999, Christopher Lippard and Chad Watts were drinking and looking for marijuana. The two men had only recently met, like a few weeks earlier, so they were kind of hanging out, new buds. And they decided to head to Mark Stout's house. The pair picked up Mark Stout and Charles Roach. Lippard was driving Watts' car, and while they're out cruising around, drinking and smoking in the early morning hours.
Such a great idea. Really, it's the best time to be drinking and smoking and driving a car.
This is a car full of shitbirds.
This is a car full of shitbirds. A convenience slam full of shitbirds.
It's like a caravan of shitbirds, right? Lippard's driving his car and he runs over something and somehow punctures the gas tank. Chad Watts became upset that his vehicle was damaged, and come on, who wouldn't get mad about that?
Well, and that's that's not just a scuff on the car or something. You've made it inoperable and dangerous to drive now, right?
Watts and Roach, who had not hit it off, began arguing. At some point, Mark Stout and Charles Roach began beating up Chad Watts, and then they threw him in the trunk of the car. Lippard drove to a wooded area near where Roach grew up, a rural spot along a creek in Hiddenite. It was there that Roach climbed out of the car and opened the trunk. He hit Watts with a shotgun, and according to Christopher Lippard, broke his neck. Roach shot Watts in the eye, and Lippard shot him in the head.
Oh, my God. So how does an argument over being dumb, which are all out there probably half buzzed, turn into murder? I mean, that's a very strong reaction.
Exactly. The three men buried Watts under a log in the creek. Lippard, Roach, and Stout walked a few miles to the main road where they were able to hitch a ride back to Mark Stout's house. I should also mention that Charles Roach and Christopher Lippard hadn't been good friends at all. They kind of were just acquaintances as well. And as a matter of fact, Roach didn't even know Lippard's last name. He just knew him as Chris or Christopher.
Yeah, you don't know anyone at all if you don't know their last name. I mean,
Right?
I know, people I'd consider acquaintances or associates. I typically know their last name.
The men left the shotgun at Stout's house and put their clothes into a bag which they would dispose of at a fish camp. Lippard went to his grandparents' house and spent the night. The next morning, Christopher Lippard stole a 1970 Ford pickup truck in Iredell County and drove over to Mark Stout's house. The three men then drove to Walmart in the stolen truck, where Lippard and Roach stole 2 pairs of boots. They also took a license plate off another similar-looking truck. Back at Stout's house, he gave the men a sawed-off shotgun, some ammunition, and a can of mace. Lippard and Roach were going to run after killing Chad Watts. Stout was in a different place, though. He had a fiancée and a 1-month-old baby daughter. Stout was also starting a new job at a Hiddenite furniture factory on Monday morning.
So, well, he shouldn't even be hanging out with these knuckleheads, for one, I don't think. But he's just like helping them get their stuff together so they can get the hell out. And maybe he wants to just be rid of them, you think?
Possibly. But also in my research, I've discovered that Mark Stout's name is still in the headlines.
Really?
He is a career criminal.
Oh, so he didn't.
With arrests, as recently I could find as 2021.
So he didn't clean his act up, do the right thing.
If anything, he just continued to decline.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, everything from kidnapping, holding a girlfriend hostage, basically.
That was all a mistake.
Methamphetamine. I mean, it just goes on and on.
She took me barring the door and threatening her life as I did kidnapping. And like I didn't want her to leave. And it's just not the way it went down, okay?
Well, he didn't last long at the furniture factory. I guess we can, we can make that assessment.
So how many months do you think he got Employee of the Month and his picture hung up?
Christopher Lippard and Charles Roach headed west in the stolen truck on I-40. Between 6 and 7 p.m. on September 30th of 1999, a man named Bart Long headed into a rest area west of Hickory, North Carolina. It's my understanding it's the rest area that's in Morganton, like right around Morganton. Roach pretended to use the urinal while waiting for Long to enter into a stall. Once Long was on the toilet, Roach entered the stall, spraying him with pepper spray, and put the man in a sleeper hold. Roach tried to rob Long, demanding the man's wallet, but Long's screams attracted a crowd of people, and that's when Charles Roach fled the scene.
Yeah, that was a great plan. Like no one else is going to use this facility off of a busy interstate. I-40 is one of the most busy interstates in America.
Look, no one is accusing Charles Roach of being in Mensa.
I've got to say, as this story develops, the listeners will know how bumbling and idiotic these two guys truly are, because that's just what keeps making this get worse and worse. Just their pure incompetence.
They're dumb and dangerous.
Pure incompetence, but not afraid to be violent as the first solution for something.
Just dumb as fuck and extremely dangerous.
That's a very accurate description.
Just not a good combination.
No, it's a scary combination.
Very.
I mean, honestly, I would almost prefer smart and dangerous, because dumb and dangerous is, it's just not a good combination.
Roach and Lippard were driving on Interstate 40 near exit 20, which is Jonathan Creek Road in Haywood County, when the stolen truck driven by Lippard was accidentally backed off the road and into a ditch. Now, how this guy just can't drive, I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're going down the interstate, right? So they had to maybe have pulled over on the shoulder or something like that. And, some of the off ramps and things do have embankments, directly down from the road as you come around, because the interstate wraps around under, bridges and stuff right there. So who knows? So the dumbasses got the truck stuck.
The Jonathan Creek Road intersects with Rabbit Skin Road, which was about 30 to 50 yards away from where this truck gets stuck. Lippard began trying to flag down other drivers in hopes of catching a ride. One vehicle stopped, and Lippard offered the man $50 for a ride. However, the driver smartly declined. Other drivers sized up the two men who were carrying a case of beer and refused to give them rides, while others completely bypassed them altogether and wouldn't even stop for them.
And I'm not surprised that multiple people did stop and when they see a vehicle stuck, because in an area like this, it's not hard to get someone to stop and help you. And
Everybody is very willing to help. And this community in particular that we're talking about, the Jonathan Creek community, this is an area that is farmland, a lot of generations of families living there. Everybody knows everybody. Who's your daddy? Who's your granddaddy kind of people. And they are the first folks that would see a vehicle in distress, a person in distress, and would be willing to stop and say, hey, can I help you?
Yeah, and a lot of people would likely have things they could use, ropes, chains, stuff like that to pull someone out, because people are into four-wheeling, everybody's got a truck, things like that. So, those people were lucky to have, have a brush with these people and get to keep moving.
Having no success in hitchhiking, Roach and Lippard decided to walk to nearby Rabbit Skin Road in hopes of stealing a car. The first house they approached was at 126 Earl Drive, the home of Earl and Cora Phillips, but it wasn't actually the first house on Earl Lane. Now I went by Earl Lane today, Dylan, to check it out, and it is a gravel driveway that goes kind of straight up this hill, kind of mountain. You can't see any houses really from the road, but there were, I think 4 houses on this piece of property.
Right.
All owned by the family.
Right. This is just pure bad luck as far as where their house is at. And you got these two dumbasses looking for something to steal, a way to get out, keep moving. And it's unfortunate.
Now, the first home on Earl Lane had actually belonged to Earl's parents and had sat empty since their recent passing. I believe Earl's father had passed about 7 years before this, and his mother, within a few years. And it's my understanding that Earl actually built that home for his parents so they could be close to him.
Oh, that's
and
sweet.
He could check in on them. Earl's elderly sister, in her 90s, lived in a house further up the driveway. And at the top of the hill was the home belonging to Earl's son, Eddie Phillips, and he lived there with his wife, Mitzi, and their children, Katie, Sarah, and Connie. Their other 2 daughters, Tina and Ginger, were adults living on their own at this time. Christopher Lippard was first to enter into the Phillips home. Immediately, Charles Roach heard a woman screaming, and that's when he, walked into the house. 73-year-old great-grandmother Cora Phillips was lying on the floor while Lippard held a shotgun to her head. Her husband Earl was pleading with the young man not to kill his wife. By now, Charles Roach assured the elderly couple that no one would die or get hurt. Roach asked the man if he had any guns in the house, and Earl Phillips directed him to a gun cabinet. There, Roach selected a 20-gauge shotgun, grabbed a handful of shells, and a .22 caliber rifle. Roach then cut the telephone cord at the wall. After stealing from this family, Roach and Lippard bound the couple's hands together with duct tape. They stole $50 from Earl's wallet. And this whole time, Cora Phillips, she's screaming.
Well, yeah.
She's terrified. There's this home invasion. You have these two very terrifying men with shotguns in your face. I cannot imagine what this poor couple was feeling or thinking. This is a nightmare.
No, it's just pure terror. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. You don't know what these people are doing or going to do, and I'm sure they're acting erratic and off their damn rockers because they've likely been doing any drugs they can get their hands on. They're in a frantic state, running, on the run.
Lippard said that's when he bent down and put his hands on her head while she's screaming. And when he does this, Roach shoots her in the head.
Oh, my God.
Blood splatters across Lippard's shirt. Roach leaned down to shoot Earl Phillips. After murdering the pair, they took the keys to Earl's 1986 Ford pickup truck. Roach and Lippard drove Phillips' truck away from the house down toward Rabbit Skin Road. While driving down the lane, the pair passed a small red Saturn car heading up towards the house. As Lippard reached the bottom of Earl Lane, where it intersects with Rabbit Skin Road, he overturns the truck.
Okay. I have no words to describe how dumb this guy is. Here you are, you've just...
Really dumb, bro.
Yeah, you've just murdered two innocent people just to get their stuff in another vehicle, and you wreck it, basically at the bottom of the driveway.
It was like fate wanted these two to get caught for their crimes.
Yes, I guess so, but unfortunately...
Not in time.
No, it continues. It just continues.
We're gonna get to that, Dylan. Charles Roach had to break out the passenger window in order for the pair to escape from this overturned truck.
So they literally went off the side of the bank, and it's laying on its side, basically.
Yes. Or kind of like upside down, it seems. Roach stayed behind at the truck to gather their items while Lippard walked back to the home where he had left Earl and Cora Phillips. When Christopher Lippard approached the driveway, he is greeted by 45-year-old Eddie Phillips, son of Earl and Cora. Eddie, his 44-year-old wife Mitzi, and their 14-year-old daughter Katie had been at the Haywood County Fairgrounds earlier that evening for the county fair. According to some reports, he had planned to stop off at his parents' house when they returned from the fair. Eddie and Mitzi, they were new grandparents, and they had actually left the fair, had gone to drop off their granddaughter before heading to Earl Lane. Lippard and Eddie Phillips have this physical altercation in the driveway because I'm sure Eddie Phillips is like, "Who are you? What do you want?
So this happens
I saw you in my dad's truck. I mean, what is going on?"
This happens so quickly, they've hardly even had a chance to get in the house.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So they have this altercation in the driveway. Eddie is trying to take Lippard's gun away. Roach, who had ducked into the woods, hiding after this accident, waiting for Lippard to return, hears the pair yelling, and Lippard is screaming for help from Roach. When Roach approached the two men fighting, he took his shotgun and aimed for Eddie's chest. Eddie Phillips fell in the driveway. Roach reloaded the gun, and the two men walked toward the door where Mitzi Phillips was refusing the pair entry into the home. Roach broke the door open and basically chases her into the kitchen where he shoots her in the face.
Jesus.
She lay, as she fell, in front of the stove. As he entered into the house and is, chasing this poor woman, he sees 14-year-old Katie bolt into a bathroom. So he pushed his way into the room, and he sees the girl sitting on the toilet as if she's trying to hide. Roach shot Katie Phillips once in the side of the head. In the meantime, Christopher Lippard entered the living room where the elderly couple had been bound with duct tape and killed. In a matter of minutes, 3 generations of the Phillips family are cruelly snuffed out.
It's just carnage. And there's not even a hesitation. There's no... It's just... I don't even get what's driving these guys to do this. What would have been... How different would it have been, or could have been, if they had tied... I mean, you're already invading someone's home with intent to steal, do whatever you want. and just tied those two elderly people up and taken what you wanted and got in their truck and drove off. And the interstate is at the end of the driveway. On ramp to the interstate, you're back on 40, you're heading out, you're keeping running. And that would not change, well, save for the fact that you just murdered 3 generations of a family. You could have kept going on about your business, and they would have been tied up, and then thank God their family would have came not very long afterwards and found them, and and then they could report to the police and all that. But instead, just their first move is just to literally kill everyone in sight instantly.
With no thought about it.
No thought about it at all.
Just no self-control. No control. After murdering the 5 family members, Lippard got into Mitzi's 1993 Saturn. Roach sat in the passenger seat, and the men headed down Earl Lane, passing by a car which belonged to a neighbor named Danny Messer. They pass a second car belonging to another neighbor named Todd Barong before driving the Saturn on to I-40. Now, Messer, he's a boyhood friend of Eddie Phillips, and he was driving home from the store when he saw Earl's truck lying upside down at the end of Earl Lane. Now, he thought the truck had rolled off the hill, and so he turns onto Earl Lane to alert the man about the truck, thinking that Earl doesn't have any idea his truck somehow rolled down this long driveway and flipped over.
Right.
Right?
Because he sees the vehicle flipped over, no one's around it, there's no police there, someone's not been hurt that he can tell. And I guess that's a pretty good guess as to what would happen. That would make sense in your mind when you see that.
Messer passed by Mitzi's red Saturn heading toward Rabbit Skin Road. Probably feeling a little confused about what's happened, why isn't she helping him? What's going on? Confusion. When he arrives at the house, Messer finds his friend Eddie unresponsive, lying on the ground by the driveway. Eddie was unconscious, but they believe he was still alive at this point. Messer ran into the house to get help. That's when he saw Mitzi, Cora, and Earl lying face down in a pool of blood. He noticed a pane of glass was broken on the storm door, but didn't see anything else out of place. He tried to call 911, but the phone line wasn't working. Realizing he needed to get to a phone quickly, Messer darted out of the house and into his vehicle. Messer encountered Todd Barong on the way, and the 2 men drove to a convenience store located about a quarter of a mile away on the opposite side of I-40, and that's where Barong dialed 911.
So it's hard to imagine what was going through his mind. First, he's like, "Oh Lord, that Earl's truck's rolled down the driveway and flipped over. That sucked. That stinks." And instantly goes to tell his friends and their family about it, and instantly greeted with murder. His murdered friend, or his on death's door friend.
Something none of us ever want to find.
And now you got that, and you're like, "Oh wow, something horrible's happened." Run the house for help, and it just keeps getting worse. It just keeps getting worse the further he goes into the house.
The men then returned to the crime scene where Barong waited at the bottom of Earl Lane for law enforcement to arrive. When the Haywood County Sheriff's Department arrived, they walked through the crime scene. It was then they discovered the body of 14-year-old Katie in the bathroom, and the crime scene was secured. Law enforcement was baffled. Who would have a grudge against this close-knit family? Only hours earlier, the sheriff of Haywood County, Tom Alexander, had eaten dinner across from his friends Eddie and Mitzi at the fair.
And this is a quiet area. This part of the community is even more quiet than the rest of a lot of the rest of the area. And it's just, I'm sure even the responding officers were in shock. Stuff like this just doesn't happen around here, that kind of thing.
Well, especially at this time. Nothing like this had ever happened in Haywood County.
That's true. The county and multiple county area around was much safer and quieter.
I'm not going to say we were untouched by crime, but it was so rare. And homicide has always been very rare here. It's not like you probably don't even get one a year. And then on top of that, 5, a quintuple homicide.
3 generations of a family wiped out.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the worst crimes ever in this county, and to date is one of the worst crimes that has ever taken place here. Eddie had driven a truck for Gary White Trucking Company for the past 11 years, and before that, he was employed by Southern Concrete. Mitzi worked at Paxar Center in Canton, North Carolina, and she was also a bus driver and operated a beauty salon out of her house. Both were active members at First Baptist Church of Lake Junaluska. Eddie was a deacon and a member of the ministry team, which, from what I could tell, they offered like community care in rest homes. Eddie loved to sing, and so did his 14-year-old daughter, Katie. She was a freshman at Tuscola High School. Katie was a member of chorus. I mean, these were good people, hardworking, church-going, pillars of the community. The Phillips lived close to one another and were a family that really enjoyed spending time together. You know, it wasn't just holidays. I mean, these were people who they spoke every day on the phone. They saw each other just about every day.
Well, yeah, that's why when you have family that lives in multiple homes on a piece of property, that's how it goes. You know, you're always helping each other out, you know, sharing dinners or, you know, leftovers or joining together to have a big meal.
Just kind of doing everything together. It was unfathomable to imagine any member being targeted of this family, much less all five. After hitting I-40 in the stolen Saturn, Lippard crashes the car by hitting a concrete divider. It's about a mile or a mile and a half away from the Jonathan Creek exit where they just murdered 5 people. Charles Roach immediately jumped the guardrail. Lippard crossed over the barrier on the opposite side of the road and disappeared. Soon after, Lippard was able to hitch a ride with a truck driver into Asheville, North Carolina, and then made his way to Hickory just after midnight. In Newton, North Carolina, only a few hours after Lippard aided in murdering 5 members of the Phillips family, at 1:15 a.m., he's picked up by police and held until 6:05 a.m. on October 1st for public drunkenness.
Okay. They didn't make it anywhere. This didn't
Accomplished nothing.
It was so senseless, so random and senseless. You crashed 2 vehicles within a mile of the home where you have killed 5 people, 3 generations of a family.
3 disabled vehicles.
3.
You've got
I'm
the
sorry.
First stolen
yeah,
truck.
3.
We've got Earl's 86 pickup truck, and then we've got Mitzi's Saturn.
I've never heard of anything quite like that in a crime scene and for bumbling idiot murderers. I mean, honestly, how stupid can stupid get?
So in Newton, they release him at 6:05 a.m. when he had finally sobered up. Now, he was not yet a suspect, and after some heat, the police let it be known that they had no, foreknowledge that Lippard had committed the crimes while he was being held in this, like a drunk tank.
No, this was some years ago. Word of mouth or, word of crimes and things like that traveled a lot slower. And things were a lot less connected. So we have to remember that as well.
Well, and they don't know who's done this.
And the investigators and, responding officers are just trying to get a handle on what's happening.
Yeah, they're just trying to make sense of, what they have found. They, they're not even, they're just, at this point, it's just hours after. They're just trying to figure out what has happened. They don't have suspects. At this point, they're like, who would do this? They can't even wrap their heads around what has happened because most of them had never even seen a crime of this caliber.
No, never seen a crime scene like this. This means multiple victims, young people. No.
But this, being in the drunk tank was not the first time that Lippard had run-ins with the law. The 21-year-old had a lengthy criminal history in Iredell County. Well, I guess at this time he was 20. At some point, Christopher Lippard befriends a man named Ricky Prestwood, who allows him to wash up and camp out with him, and Prestwood buys Lippard a bus ticket to New Orleans. At the crime scene, investigators collect shotgun shells and DNA evidence. Witnesses saw two white men driving Mitzi's Saturn at a high rate of speed and claimed, that the car was heading towards Tennessee. And that's the thing for our listeners to understand is this Jonathan Creek area on I-40 is just miles away from the Tennessee state line.
20 miles.
It is very, very close.
Yep.
And, you drive through from Jonathan Creek until you hit into Tennessee. You drive through an area that we call the Gorge, and it is very curvy, steep inclines.
It's one of the most dangerous stretches of interstate statistically or for road deaths and accidents in America. So it's a very dangerous piece of road. Then it kind of narrows up. The concrete barrier that this dumbass struck with the vehicle is only about 14 to 16 inches outside of your left-hand line and lane. So it's very close.
I will admit, driving through
scary.
The Gorge is intimidating.
It is when you have a whole lot of 18-wheelers that come through there, obviously.
And zipping at high speed rates, whipping around them curves.
And you have curves. You have as low as 30 mile an hour and 40 mile an hour curves because you can't go faster than that around them. I mean, it's a dangerous stretch of road. There's no doubt about that.
Eventually, the shells will match up at the murder scene they'll also find those same shells near the stolen vehicles and in the Saturn car. The guns are found in the car as well. DNA will be found on the sawed-off shotgun belonging to Christopher Lippard. A staging area for the manhunt is set up just below the victim's house, and hundreds of officers and canine search dogs join the investigation. This is like a multi-county operation. They had, I believe, 3 counties had law enforcement joining in this search. A gravel pad is used for a search helicopter. The bodies are taken to Chapel Hill, North Carolina for autopsy. As daylight spreads across Haywood County, so did the news of these horrific murders. Everyone knew the Phillips family as a wonderful group of people, and the community was absolutely devastated. 2 of their daughters, Eddie and Mitzi's daughters, Sarah and Connie, worked at Walmart, where they were well known and liked. Because again, small town, if you work at Walmart, you know everybody. It's literally like the only place to shop.
Well, yeah, I remember when this news broke and when this crime happened, and people were in shock, the entire area. It's all everyone was talking about, outside of every store, at the water coolers, all that stuff. And people just didn't know what to think about it.
I was in college when this happened. And, only 30 minutes away, words had spread quickly, to our campus. And all of us, there were a lot of us Haywood County folks, and we were all getting phone calls from our parents, from our relatives and friends, telling us this news. And people just couldn't believe that this had happened. Swarms of law enforcement dotted Rabbit Skin Road along with local reporters. The high school, Tuscola High School, brought in guidance counselors from the elementary schools to help with students being able to process their grief. One of the counselors, a woman named Deborah Barker, had gotten her hair cut by Mitzi only hours before the murder, making her one of the last persons to see Mitzi alive. And they had been good friends, for many years. And Mitzi drove a school bus, so a lot of these students knew Mitzi.
We'll see that between the school bus, being born and raised here, active in the church, multiple churches. These are the types of things you do that where a lot of different people know you. They know you. They see you weekly, multiple times a week. The hairdressing. It's just that a lot of people knew these people,
Barker told the Asheville Citizen-Times, quote, "They were just salt of the earth, good people." Not only did Katie attend Tuscola, but her older sister Sarah was a senior. Students of several age groups needed help dealing with the loss. Nearby neighbors gathered in driveways, exchanging memories and hugs. Efforts began to raise money to help the surviving daughters, Ginger, Tina, Connie, and Sarah. Walmart began accepting donations for the sisters, and community members who wanted to help but weren't sure how were directed to the fundraiser. 2 of the girls had to stay with church members and weren't allowed to get any personal items from their home, which was now considered part of a crime scene. With an active search for the suspects taking place, the area was on high alert. Reports poured in about potential sightings. Anybody that was an unfamiliar face or a person they thought might be acting strangely. All these calls kept pouring in. One woman on Oakview Road was cleaning her son's football cleats when she spotted a stranger on her property. She told him he was trespassing. Now, it turned out not to be their assailants, but it was a man from Asheville, and he did have 18 active warrants.
Wow. So someone you don't want on your property, and he got caught up in this, and he probably deserves to be in jail as well. So good for him.
Jim Fowler, who resided on nearby Liberty Church Road, heard his dog Bingo barking around 8:30 a.m. He and his sons went to see why Bingo was barking, and they were well aware of what had happened, down the road, and that law enforcement was searching for these suspects. And that's when they discover Charles Wesley Roach hiding under a truck camper on their property. Armed with a pistol, Fowler ordered Roach out from under the camper and told him to lift his hands above his head. Then he told Roach to lie down in a ditch until Fowler's sons could go call the authorities. Roach was visibly shaken. Fowler described him as polite, saying yes, sir, and no, sir. Around 9 a.m., authorities took Roach into custody. He was actually taken in by Officer Beecher Phillips, and I don't believe he was any relation to the victims. Fowler's home is about 1.5 miles from where the Phillips were killed. Now, he believed Roach had come to his property after wrecking the Saturn. Blood was found on the ground near Roach, but he was not bleeding, so he suspected that perhaps Lippard had been there with Roach and had taken off, had gotten scared and left or something. At the Haywood County Sheriff's Office, Detective Larry Bryson, who's running for sheriff now, by the way, and SBI agent Toby Hayes advised Roach of his rights, but he signed a form to waive his rights. Surprisingly, Roach was cooperative with investigators. He made no effort to deny that he was responsible for this crime, or these crimes, initially admitting that he had shot Eddie, Mitzi, and Katie. However, he blamed the deaths of Earl and Cora on his partner, Christopher, and he didn't even know his last name.
Oh, my friend Christopher, I don't know his last name.
Yes.
We're really good friends.
During the course of the interview, Roach changed his story and confessed he had shot all 5 victims. When officers pointed out the discrepancies in his earlier statement and this confession, he persisted in telling them he was the one that had done the shooting. He also mentioned the murder of 23-year-old Chad Watt, which had taken place on September 29th of 1999 in Alexander County. See, at this point, law enforcement doesn't even know that this other young man is missing.
Right.
Or that he's been murdered.
Yeah.
He gave information about where the body could be located, and it was on October 2nd of 1999 that it was located and found by Alexander County deputies. Roach also admitted to the attempted robbery at the I-40 rest area near Morganton. Despite not knowing Lippard's full name, Roach gave them details about his co-assailant. And over the next couple of days, Roach made phone calls and was able to learn Lippard's last name. It took about a week for Christopher Lippard to be tracked down in New Orleans. Tim Lippard appealed to his son over TV news to turn himself in upon learning he was a suspect. He said, quote, "I know that running away is not the answer and will only result in you or someone else getting hurt." And as I mentioned, it was about a week later that they did find him in New Orleans.
So I'm curious. I don't think you know that part, but what broke it for him? If it just made it that, if they track down or someone remembers giving him a ride or someone remembers getting the ticket for him, things like that.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how they were able
to
track
like
him
that.
down. He bought a bus ticket. Probably he's a dumbass. He probably used his name.
Well, yeah, there's that. And this was everywhere. You couldn't be in this area or from this area and not know this story, not see these pictures flashed on the news, on your TV 20 times a day, morning, noon, and night. So, yeah, very likely someone could have either seen him or be one of the people that helped him along the way. and be like, yeah, I know that guy. He stayed with me overnight or whatever. The guy, at the camp.
On October 2nd of 1999, pathologists in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, performed 5 autopsies. Pathologists removed lead shot from Earl Phillips' body, and he showed a severe injury to the head. The gunshot wound was due to a close contact at the right temple area. The gun was pressed closely against his head at the time it was fired. His hands were bound with duct tape, and his death was caused by a shotgun wound to the head. Cora Phillips had several injuries to the body, including blunt force injury lacerations and bruising on her right forearm, which were indicative of defensive injuries, like she had tried to fight for her life. Her hands were fastened with duct tape. Her death was due to a single shotgun wound in the corner of her mouth on the left side of her face, which caused a massive head injury.
Oh, my God.
I know, it's terrible.
That's what makes this even worse, is the fact that the weapon of choice was a freaking shotgun.
And what kind of monster could put a gun to a little sweet old lady's face and do this?
Yeah.
It's a fucking demon.
Pressed against him, so, yeah.
It's a demon on earth. Eddie Phillips' autopsy showed a single gunshot wound to the left side of the body, which struck his chest and abdomen, and it wounded multiple organs. Pellets and wadding were recovered from his body. The shotgun wound, according to the pathologist, would have resulted in unconsciousness in a matter of seconds. He also had blunt force injuries on his head, behind, and above the left ear. Injuries likely inflicted while he was still alive. His death was caused by the gunshot wound to the chest. Mitzi Phillips died from a gunshot wound to the head. The wound was called a large injury that effectively covered the entire forehead. She had an exit wound on the right side of her head where some of the pellets had created a hole. The shot pellets were still lodged inside her body. The shot came at close range as she had powder stippling marks on the forehead around the wound. Katie Phillips died as the result of a single shotgun wound to the head, which entered at the left eye. Some of the shot had exited from the right side of the head, but some was still present in the skull at the time of autopsy. The force of the blow removed the brain from the cranial wall. The wound came at close range and was incapacitating immediately.
Yeah, you think?
Katie had a defensive wound on her left hand, showing that she had raised it to her face as if to shield herself from this gunshot, which is so fucking heartbreaking to think about. On October 12th, State Bureau of Investigation agent Hayes interviewed Lippert in New Orleans. Lippert said he had shot the old lady once, but she was already dead when he had done this.
Oh, yeah, that makes it better.
He later stated that he had not shot anyone. Lippert was taken to trial first. The 21-year-old was tried in July of 2000 on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder. Jurors were shown a 15-minute walkthrough video of the crime scene and the victims that was recorded by one of the SBI agents. The graphic video showed blood, tissue, and other biological materials on the walls, ceilings, and furniture. The high school dropout avoided the death penalty after an 8-woman, 4-man jury deadlocked over whether he should spend his life in prison or face the death penalty for his role in the quintuple homicide. I can't talk at this point. Lippert was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms plus 220 to 273 years in prison.
He deserved death as well.
Lippert's defense attorneys pointed to the fact that he was not the trigger man and had blindly followed Roach in a drunken stupor. Tim Lippert was relieved his son was spared the death penalty and told reporters, quote, "We believed all along he didn't kill anybody."
I'm sorry. He's going along on this stupid-ass adventure, and I'm sorry. He's in my book.
Well, at no point did he try to stop this from happening.
No, after he shoots the first victim, you'd be like, what the fuck, dude? What are you doing? No, I don't want any part of this. That's a different story. It's still horrible, but that would be a different story. You went back over and over. If you had not went back to the house when the rest of the family showed up, Roach wouldn't have followed. You wouldn't have called Roach up. You called Roach back after you just watched him cold-bloodedly kill an elderly couple that he didn't have to kill. They were not, you know what I mean? They were not attacking, they were doing their best to defend themselves, but it was an elderly couple, and they got the jump on him. So yeah, he's just as much responsible for this, in my opinion.
Amen, Dylan.
Piece of shit, and that's when you want Old Testament God to just make these people's heads explode before they can do this, harm people like this.
Earlene Jenkins, Cora and Earl's daughter, Eddie's sister, had wanted the death penalty for Lippard, but said she would accept whatever punishment the jury saw fit. The daughter of Earl and Cora hoped one day she would be able to forgive the young man who had slain 5 members of her family. She said, quote, "They took 5 precious members of my family away from me. No, I can't forgive him right now." Earlene, a deeply religious woman, would continue struggling with whether she could forgive either man in the slayings. Roach was scheduled for trial in March of 2001. Roach's attorneys argued that he did not have the mental capacity to carry out the 5 murders. They argued that he had killed Eddie, Katie, and Mitzi, but suggested that Lippard had murdered the elderly couple. During the trial, this is strange, Dylan, an Orange County teenager, 17-year-old Evan Goddard Scott, was wearing all black and was spotted sort of lurking around the courthouse. He had been refused entry into the courtroom for the trial. When law enforcement approached him, the teen was found sitting, kind of alone and holding a brick. He claimed he had no intent to harm Roach or anyone else, but they arrested him anyway.
Oh, wow. He's about to Jack Ruby his ass. You think?
I don't know.
Well, hey.
But I thought that was kind of a wild side note.
He woke up and chose violence.
That this boy, was trying to get in there. Roach's sister testified, and her name is Linda Josie. She testified that alcohol brought out the worst in her brother. Roach claimed he was under the influence of alcohol and animal tranquilizers at the time of the killings. Linda Josie painted an extremely abusive childhood where her father, Daniel Roach, would force the young Charles to drink beer and liquor. A story of childhood trauma was described. Thanksgiving of 1983, young Charles watched his father get into a gunfight with a neighbor. Daniel Roach allegedly shot the neighbor 6 times in front of his young son.
Well, that's horrible.
Linda said her father, a 73-year-old Navy veteran, was a lot like Charles, the nicest man when he was sober, but really cruel when he was drinking. She would later say it was very difficult to talk badly about her daddy on the stand. Linda would later tell the newspaper, the Asheville Citizen-Times, that the Phillips family had treated her with nothing but respect during the trial, and that not everyone in Haywood County had been so civil. She was able to have a lengthy conversation with Connie Phillips, and because the family had been so polite to her, she had a hard time excusing what her brother had done. Dr. Claudia Coleman, a forensic pathology expert, testified that Charles Roach suffered from a chronic anxiety disorder and had low average intelligence.
So that's the kind of people this family is, the kind of people they are. They're already, I'm sorry, let me think how I'm going to say this. Inside themselves, they're already struggling and trying to reach a level of forgiveness, or that's already in the front of their mind, because for them, and I understand the idea of forgiveness. I don't think I have it in me personally. I think it would just be full of too much rage and hate. But I think in the long run, it's best for the people and the families to let that go, let that kind of a deep hatred go, because it harms them and their energy over the years. And but they're not blaming her for what her brother did.
Right. And these are very,
and
these are deeply religious people. So they are, they are placing their troubles with God.
Right.
And putting their troubles and their faith to the test with this.
Yeah, and they may even recognize, like we often say, that her family's been torn apart by this as well, for her brother having committed this crime. What's left, or what there is of her family.
Well, exactly. Linda Josie described having to explain to her 9-year-old son,
your uncle,
this is what happened to your uncle, and this is what could happen to him, and that, he was terrified and started having nightmares about the possibility that his uncle would be executed. So this is definitely, it impacts a lot of people. This doctor testified about Roach's violent upbringing. Dr. Coleman said that Roach had a typical dependent personality disorder. He needs high affection and acceptance from other people and is willing to go to great lengths to get that acceptance. His history of substance abuse also attributed to his anxiety. In the expert's opinion, Roach's use of drugs and alcohol on September 30th, in combination with this personality disorder and anxiety disorders, would have affected his judgment, reasoning, and problem-solving capabilities at the time of the murders. But Roach was found guilty and sentenced to death.
Jury was not having it.
Roach waived appealing his sentence. During his 5 years in prison awaiting execution, he found religion. His attorney that had kind of been handling the appeal process until Roach just demanded, I want this to be dropped. I don't want to go on with this, was a guy who had known Roach since childhood. And this attorney said making the decision to die was probably the only time in his life when Charles felt like he had some control.
No, I must say he seemed, in the end, remorseful and accepting his punishment for what he'd done. So I will give him a hint of credit for that, because that's just very seldom the case in any of these stories that you tell.
Well, at this point, it's like the least you can do.
Yes.
In an interview with the Charlotte Observer, Charles Roach said from death row, quote, "It only takes words to say you're sorry, but it takes your heart to show it." Victims' relatives struggled with whether to accept his expressions of remorse. 5 years before, Roach had said he didn't care about other people and their feelings, but before his execution, he talked obsessively about causing pain and hurt to others. Earlene Jenkins suffered 2 strokes after the massacre of her 5 family members, and doctors couldn't find a reason other than to say it was brought on by her PTSD. Marie Watts, grandmother of Chad Watts, said at 74, she still worked full-time because she couldn't stand to be alone with her idle thoughts that flooded her mind, thinking about her grandson. Roach never tried to argue his innocence. He told reporters he believed he would go to heaven after finding God. Roach also kept a clipping of a newspaper which featured the Phillips family to remind himself of the person he never wanted to be again. Roach told the Observer he recalled every detail of that night and replayed it often in his mind, that it haunted him. He said, quote, "I've had times where I asked myself what caused me to hurt those folks. That's something I've asked myself thousands of times. This is bad to say, but I've not found the reason why yet." He said he took pain and hurt from his own heart, and he was taking it out on people who didn't deserve it. Roach said the words Earl Phillips had said to him, "God bless you, son," had really impacted him. After killing Watts, Roach said he felt numb and detached, as if he was already dead.
So, yeah, it's showing obvious signs of remorse. Sounds like he's done a lot of
soul searching.
Soul searching and reflection on his actions and stuff, but I still am glad that he's dead. I still think he should have gotten the death penalty, and the fact that he accepted that doesn't change that fact. And I also think Lipper should have got the death penalty as well.
Charles' execution was carried out on October 22nd, 2004. His final meal, which I did find on the internet, Dylan.
Should have been a 20-gauge shell.
It was a sirloin steak, popcorn shrimp, salad with blue cheese dressing, a honey bun, and a vanilla Coke. His final words were, quote, "I can only hope and pray the pain and hurt I caused you will be healed as I give my life as a key to forgiveness. May God's love shine on you." He left behind 2 sons at the time that were aged 9 and 10. Earlene Jenkins said she had forgiven him in a way, but not what he had done. She believed he needed to be punished for what, he had done, but also expressed that she didn't want him to expend eternity in hell. Marie Watts said she hoped he had made things right with God. Sarah Phillips had testified during the penalty phase how difficult it had been losing her best friend Katie. She continued having nightmares about her sister calling out for help. Just so sad.
That's awful.
Connie Phillips Millsaps testified that she had lost her home on the night her parents were killed, saying, quote, "We got kicked out of the nest. There was no more nest." Mills Saps had gotten married after the murders and discussed how she missed having her mother help plan the wedding and didn't have a father to walk her down the aisle. She didn't want to go to her parents' house alone after the murders, and Erlene had noted that the home place is lonesome. Erlene said, "My heart still aches. I'm very lonesome at times. I hurt, I ache because of this. To me, it will never be over." The family put Eddie and Mitzi's house up for sale because the daughters couldn't live there. Just too many painful memories. The 5 relatives were all buried at the Owens family cemetery. The Phillips family murders 2 decades later still hangs heavy on many in this county. And though they are gone, they will never be forgotten.
No one will ever, the entire community will never forget this family and the horrible thing that was done to them. I was under the impression that the house was raised at some point after these murders and all the rest of this worked itself out.
Well, of course, still in this research was from like 2001.
But I believe I'm.
So
I
that's
could be
possible, but according to, the last bit of newspaper information I could find, they were putting the house up for sale, and they were not sure what they would do with Earl and Cora's home. So I don't know. I don't have that information.
Yeah, I don't know either. I know that there is, because you can see up this drive when you drive to either get on the interstate there or go and cut up rabbit skin. You can see up this drive and this property, and there used to be a little white house right there. Boom, first one. But in your description of, and not that it matters, I guess it's none of my business. In your description of the property, that could have been his parents' house that he had built for his parents.
Possibly.
Because I believe it was the first home up the drive.
Yeah, because there were the parents.
Right.
Then you had Earl and Cora. Then you had his elderly sister. And then at the top of the hill was Eddie and Mitzi.
Okay.
So you had 4 different houses on this road.
Well, again, it's not really my business. And no one ever heals from the death of a family member, let alone this horrific fashion. And this gaping hole left in this family with the 5 members, 3 generations, children involved. It's just,
Just devastating.
yeah. I don't know how much better it gets over the years, Yeah, I can't imagine it gets much better.
Well, I hope that in telling the story we have, we've told the story and, while maintaining a good respect for this family because, this really, this was a very powerful case and, really, left a mark on a lot of folks in our community and they won't be forgotten.
No, never.
Anytime soon. So that has been the Phillips family murder, Dylan.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, Roach is long gone. Christopher Lippard still in state prison and still a shitbird. When I went to pull up his Department of Corrections information, homeboy has 89 infractions. And they range from, assaulting a government official, escape, weapons,
fights with other inmates, everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he is yet to grow up and evolve while in prison.
So he hasn't learned anything.
No.
He hasn't learned anything, and he deserved.
He's not done anything to better himself.
To not be here.
And while he's been in prison, and 4 life sentences. This guy's never going to see the light of day.
No.
He will never be outside of prison walls. But you'd think that with all that time on your hands, you might get your shit together and try to be a decent human being.
Well, with these lifers, man, and I know some state penitentiaries do this, but they should at least be working, producing goods that are sold and all that money. And I know that is done in some states. But I'm sorry, and you can be like, oh, slave labor, this and that. Your 4 life sentences, you had a hand in the death of 5 people, 3 generations. Oh, well, I really don't give a fuck if you get paid a fair wage or not for your labor. Produce goods and pour all that profit back into charitable things that help victims and stuff like that. instead of just, doing their thing, chilling, being a shitberg, all his time on his hand, run around, fight and argue, and think about ways to try to escape because,
assaulting guards.
guards, putting other people's lives in safety and in danger. Damn. He needs something to do.
Yeah, 89 infractions.
And I got to think that's a lot.
That is a lot.
Right.
That is definitely a lot.
So he's obviously embraced. He doesn't care about getting what you can't. Once someone has this real life, for the rest of your life, you will die in state custody. What else can you do to them? I mean, there's segregation. There's not segregation, but like the SHU, the special housing, whatever unit, and where they put solitary, the hole, whatever you want to call it. But what else can you do? You can't put them in jail longer than life. And some of these people just don't give a damn anymore. And they turn into animals.
And just run roughshod.
Try.
Yeah. Yeah, he sounds like a real winner. Well, if you have any feedback, comments, have a listener story for us, you can always reach out to mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners.
And if you would like to join our lovely patrons at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast, you can access all kinds of extra and ad-free content. We have a great time over there, and we post a good bit of bonus materials.
I love your spiel there, Dylan.
I finally said it with it. I can finally say the website.
You did a really good job.
Thanks.
Don't forget that we have a true crime podcast calendar in the works. Between now and November 30th, you can sign up for a pre-sale calendar. And when you do that, you're going to get 10% off.
What?
10% off. All you have to do is go to podcastcalendars.com. And you can be a part of, get a gift, buy a gift for yourself, a gift for your loved one, a true crime podcast calendar.
Yeah, and we even have a code for that, right?
We do, Dylan. I'm going to tell you about that. So we have a promo code that's going to give you $5 off. So not only do you get a pre-sale order with that 10% off, but you're going to get another $5 off if you use our promo code Mountain Murders. That's right, Dylan. Both deals are combinable. And you know me, I love a good deal. If I got a coupon, if I got a discount, I'm going to use it.
Order early and you can stack the savings.
Again, go to podcastcalendars.com to make your purchase.
And I learned something very interesting about this whole calendar deal. Heather showed me that she did the layout for our page in the calendar.
Well, no, I didn't do the layout. I sent in
and they did the layout.
They did the layout.
Oh,
so
okay.
You've actually gotten a sneak peek at our calendar page.
It looks incredible.
And I know the month we're going to be featured. I don't know if I should tell you. It should be a secret.
No, maybe wait.
But this podcast calendar, it's going to feature 12 indie true crime podcasts. There are going to be cool, true crime facts, on the calendar, various dates of importance for all you crime junkies.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a great way to help support us and other independent podcasts.
Exactly.
And it'll be a good way to kind of get to know them a little bit. And
get some new content.
Get some new content, son. I'm going to be listening to every month.
You'll have... Well, you already listen to Mountain Murders, but you'll have 11 new true crime podcasts to check out.
I can't wait. I need the content.
2023. So you are just going to have so much true crime. It's just going to be like oozing out of your ears. It's going to be amazing.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. We love you. You got to say it, Dylan.
We love you all.
And we will be back on Wednesday with our midweek. We promise. We're going to stick to our schedule this week.
Uh-oh.
Bye, Dylan.
Bye, Heather.